So I think the biggest thing there is that when you become a new leader, you've got to build trust. And in order to do that, you've got to have some type of emotional connection with your team. You have to be reliable. You've got to show that you're going to show up for them, that you've got their back at all times. And I think that when you do those things, it immediately begins to build trust. And trust is at the heart of loyalty.
Welcome to the Talk Chamber, a production of the Greater Memphis Chamber. The Talk Chamber is the podcast for the latest on the Chamber, economic development, and all things Memphis. This mic is powered by ORTHOSOUTH, world-class orthopedic care across the Mid-South. Today's episode features Paige Walkup, the president of Caissa Public Strategies. Paige, thank you so much for sitting down with me and coming on the Talk Chamber.
You know I love to be down here with y'all. So.
I know, and we are glad to have you. Today, our conversation, we're going to cover Women's Business Council, but we're going to talk a little bit about what you do as well.
Okay.
For our audience, if you don't know Paige, she has some really interesting work and is just a great force in the comms and public strategy world. So I'm excited to hear from you and just start this conversation.
Sure.
So kick us off. Tell us about yourself. What do you do?
So, as you said, I'm the president of Caissa Public Strategy. Oddly, I'm an applied anthropologist by training. And so I kind of approach things from a different angle. At Caissa, we're a full-service communications firm, and we really specialize in community engagement. And then I would say, really, though, our focus over the last decade has been mostly in the public school space, the K through 12 space, with our sister company, Caissa K-12. And in fact, we're the nation's #1 leader in student recruitment for public schools all across the nation. So we work in about 28 states with districts all across the country.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what's your Memphis story? How did you end up here? And how is this the place that you are?
That's a crazy story. So, well, it's not really that crazy, but it's just kind of funny. But as you well know, I am not one to keep my opinions to myself. It's probably the early 90s. I was in D.C. at an American Anthropological Association meeting, and I disagreed with the plenary speaker, and I stood up and talked.
Uh-oh.
And, yeah. So after the session, I had a professor from the University of Memphis come up to me, and she said, "You're going to come to Memphis." And I said, "No, I've already got a commitment. I'm going someplace else." And she's like, "No, you're going to come to Memphis." So I thought, all right, well, it's not going to hurt me to come, but, let me go look at them and see what it's like. And that whole session really kind of transformed my whole career path in life in general. I got here and I didn't want to be anywhere else. And so I ended up going through graduate school here, and then I was working on a grant with the city of Memphis, and I needed some data. I shared some data with a guy who ended up being my husband. And so he's a Memphian, and now I'm a Memphian, which is interesting for me to say because up until college, due to my father's job, we moved about every 2 to 3 years. So I've lived in Memphis longer than anywhere else I've lived in my entire life. And, I don't want to be anywhere else. I find when I'm away, I miss the sound. I miss the FedEx planes. I miss the conversations, the disputes, just the heart of who we are. And so that's how I got here and why I stayed is all of those things just make us, a community.
When you were first told that you were going to come to Memphis, were you like, what was your impression of Memphis? Were you?
I had absolutely zero clue about Memphis. And I mean, Elvis is from here, there's barbecue, but I really didn't understand the sense of community, the neighborhoods, and the people. And that's what drew me here was once I came to the university and talked to some professors and started to build relationships. It's what made me want to come, but then also stay because, for the first part of my career, I really worked in community development, affordable housing. And so I was out in neighborhoods every day, and it is our neighborhoods and our communities are what drives the city.
Yes, indeed. I agree with that. So to pivot a bit, now that you've been in this community, you've worked in this community, live, work, and play here, And you've gotten so involved that you are now one of our leaders of our Women's Business Council at the Chamber. Could you tell us, what is the Women's Business Council?
Sure. So, it's kind of, I hate to say when people say, oh, it's a council or it's a forum or it's a network. I think it's a very fluid thing. Over the last 5 to 7 years, we've really kind of codified it in a large way. When we first formed this under Phil Trineri's leadership, we had heard from the community that women were looking for something different, and they were looking. There are so many good opportunities for professional development that are tailored to women here in Memphis, but they felt like they needed something more. And so our goal was, okay, how do we do that and not be redundant to the other things that are happening in town? And we realized that we had to approach it a little bit differently. So we created a place where women across industries, across sectors, across generations can come together. We typically get together quarterly, but we also have some things that are one-off. And it's really about building networks to help you both personally and professionally grow. And it's been a lovely thing to watch, because it has evolved from a group of 50 women in a room discussing the priorities that they felt were needed for this, to now we've got on average about 125 folks that come to each session, sometimes more. So
yeah, I mean, as I'm saying this as like an attendee, as somebody who has gone to those sessions, it's really awesome. And there are so many inspiring women who are doing really great things for the city and for our community, and building that network and having those connections has been fruitful in my life. And it's a really great opportunity. So if anybody out there, any woman out there is listening and wants to be a part of our Women's Business Council, you can find that on our website. It is
We've got a great session coming up too with Carmi and Hamilton. So
I know I'm excited for that one too. I was going to let you mention it, so I'm glad you did.
Yeah. So I think when you talk about that ability to network and to have those resources, one of the things that we really have focused on, Kandace and I, Kandace Stewart is the other co-chair, is really meeting people where they are. Mm-hmm. One of the things we've heard is often meetings get scheduled when people can't come to them. So we try to mix it up where we can get to folks at different times of the day. We do a combination of social and professional development. And so it's not just 9:30 or a lunch meeting, people, because as women, we have different schedules. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to be frank about it. And, oftentimes we have outside responsibilities as mothers, or caregivers that we have to address. And so we've really tried to be responsive to that, because that was one of the first things we heard was we can't just have this be a standing time, because not everybody can come at the same time.
Right. And that's one of the things I love. Sometimes it's a breakfast, early morning meeting. This next one is in the afternoon, evening.
Cocktail-y type. Yeah.
Yeah, which lends to all sorts of different people from different areas of life, in different seasons of life, areas of life, allows them to come together. And so you're not getting just one demographic or one, industry, one group of
right, or one women. Age set,
yeah.
That maybe has more flexibility to be able to travel and to travel to meetings, to get out of the office, mm-hmm. to do things like that. The other thing we've really focused on in building this space is having relevant learning. So we didn't want things to just be a how do I type environment. A lot of professional development is lecture based. Mm-hmm. It's not engaged. And we have very purposely worked to make each of our sessions have an engagement component to it, because we feel like you're going to get more out of conversation. The whole point is the convening of diverse, people in their career channel, like wherever they are in that continuum, and people learning from each other. And you can't do that when you're just sitting in a room listening. Mm-hmm. And so we've really tried to, we constantly survey participants and members and make sure that we're adjusting, because everybody's needs have changed. When we started this, there was a set of priorities. COVID hit. We had to go all virtual, which was really hard. It was really stressful, but we kept it going because we knew that we needed that continuity and connection. And then post-COVID, we came out strong, real strong, and we're like, okay, we're here, we're going to do this. And we saw a huge bloom in attendance because people were so eager for it. But at the same time, we had to tweak our programming because we had come out of COVID and things were totally different.
Right.
You're dealing with remote working. You were dealing with folks that had gotten used to being at home that were now having to go back into the workplace. You also had people that were considering career changes. I mean, everything changed. All the topics changed. And so we've tried to be very responsive to that. And at the same time, also looking at opportunities of where we can figure out how to be of more value across generations. I think I'm at a point in my career that I don't necessarily need the same things as one of my project managers that's coming in. But I still need that project manager for her to have the opportunity to build relationships, that she has her own networks. But we recognized maybe we need to be doing something to grow our young professionals. And we just kind of sat with it. And one night I was out having cocktails. Several people have heard me tell the story, but it's a true story because it's a cocktail napkin story.
I know where you're going with it, and I think she came on this podcast and might have shared the same story. Keep going.
That's so funny. But Pat Mitchell-Worley and I were out having cocktails, and we were like, we started talking about young women and how we had such big aspirations and we saw so much promise. And how do we do this? And I said, we've got to figure out a way to work with Soulsville and at the Women's Business Council, and what can we do? So we started this partnership. First year, it was, bringing professional women in and pairing them up with students, and it was really more of a learning environment for the young women to hear and listen, and there was engagement at the table. And now, after 5 years, we've evolved, and so now we have young women that are shadowing professionals. They are building long-term relationships with them, that are starting early in their, educational process before they move out, before they graduate, and move into the next phase of their career. And it's been lovely to watch and to hear the stories of these young women and to watch the interaction and the learning also from the tenured members who are like having these students shadow them and going, oh man, she's taught me something too,
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think especially for the students and for the young women, that's a very pivotal time to be figuring out what you want to do with the rest of your life, what you're interested in, what does it mean to be in this career or that career. And so having a mentor, having somebody to shadow and understand their experience helps that person decide where they want to go. And then
and even how to ask a question.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even approach somebody that you're interested in knowing about?
Yeah.
You don't know that when you're 16, 17. You had the opportunity. Most women have not had that opportunity.
So we've touched a lot on, what y'all do. What would you say is if you could sum it up in one sentence, what's the mission statement of the Women's Business Council?
So I think it was really to kind of cultivate that meaningful connections, to build a place for women across all of those sectors and generations to build a network of new contacts that could help them. And whether it is in a personal way or in a professional way. And just to kind of button that up a little bit. So at our last session, last quarter, we did something that was nothing but networking, but it was very tailored networking. It wasn't like free range. You walk into a cocktail party and have to hope for the best. We paired people up with tables. There were table mentors that helped facilitate conversations. And we had purposeful conversations about where people were in their careers and the things they were looking for. And then each person to the table had an opportunity to share how they thought that they could help in that way, help that person. And what was so great was that there was also a call to action at the end of the meeting that was like, okay, everybody's going to exchange information. Everybody's going to share social media information. Everyone is going to make sure they've got each other's LinkedIn, because you can go to a cocktail party and meet somebody and say, oh, we should have lunch. But 90% of the time that doesn't happen.
Right.
And so our goal was, in mission, back to your question, was to create that space where there was purposeful networking that then converted into actual support for people.
I mean, it's one thing to leave a conference, leave a networking event with a stack of business cards, and most of the time they go in the trash. They sit.
Or you don't follow up. You don't
say,
do the email. You don't. You just don't do it.
They sit in the purse. They're in a drawer, sitting on your counter for ages. Like
right.
Nothing ever. You think you might do something with it, but you never do.
You never know.
And so, on topic, off topic. At a conference in college, one of the people I met there said that the number one thing that they look for in, young people is somebody who once they meet, they follow up. And they said that was like their number one thing is follow up. So if you said that you were going to email to get coffee, do that and email and follow up. And so it's hard, but I think creating an environment where you can do that and it kind of promotes that makes the networking meaningful.
I agree.
And long lasting.
Definitely.
I mean, it's hard because if you just meet somebody and then nothing ever happens with it, that's not really a connection that provides value to you personally or professionally.
Correct.
So what has your own path to leadership looked like, and what has it taught you about leading as a woman?
So it's kind of, I think about this, particularly in the context of the Women's Business Council, because most of my mentors have been men throughout my career. My parents were a fierce influence over me. My mother is an extremely strong, independent woman who taught me from a very early age that there was absolutely zero reason that you can't find a solution to something on your own and figure out how to do it. And I think that instilled a lot of values in me in saying, okay, I have to get to the bottom of this. I'm not going to give up on something until I can find a solution. From my father, I really learned a lot about diplomacy and work ethic and personal growth through your career, because I watched him grow as a leader. He was from a very small town in eastern North Carolina. He had a very high profile job in the U.S. government, and to watch him lead through that position, he changed the more that he was exposed to travel and diversity and people, and became a better leader. And it was something that I saw and embraced very early on and wanted to be part of my own leadership style. And then as I went through school and through my educational process, some of those folks were some of the strongest impacts on my own leadership skills. Mm-hmm. I had a professor who was actually female in undergraduate who was very influential in saying, you've got to hone in on your research skills because it's going to open up everything for you, and build relationships there. And so she led me down a path that changed kind of my career trajectory. And really it was what was one of the impetuses for why I was at that meeting, spoke, and all of those things that ended up me coming to Memphis. And then when I got here in graduate school, I had Stan Highland, who's a retired professor now from the University of Memphis, who's very engaged in Memphis community development work. And Stan was not only a mentor, but a teacher and a combative. He really worked with me on constantly reassessing my position and making sure that I was being inclusive at all times and aware of the context I was working in. And as I moved into my career, I had another anthropologist, Tim Bolding, who's no longer with us. And Tim taught me things in ways that's very hard to explain, because he was very much a bull in a china cabinet. God love him. But the thing that I learned that has stuck with me the most was being my authentic self, and that you can't lead a team unless you're being authentic, and you can't, people see right through it when you're not. And so it was, I think I'm now a combination of all of those people and other people that have touched me as well, and helped mentor me over the years. But it's interesting because I have such strong value for the opportunity for women to mentor women, but I think that you've got to take your opportunities to develop your leadership from whoever's in front of you.
Yeah.
And you may not until later in your career or at a special moment have exactly that person that you want. But I took what was in front of me and learned from those folks and was able to build, a healthy career and a leadership style that I feel comfortable with.
So with all of that in mind, what's a piece of advice that you would give to someone who is stepping into a leadership role, whether that's through a promotion or just their social activity, whatever it is?
Sure.
What kind of leadership advice would you give?
I'll go back to being authentic. So I think the biggest thing there is that when you become a new leader, you've got to build trust. And in order to do that, you've got to have some type of emotional connection with your team. You have to be reliable. You've got to show that you're going to show up for them, that you've got their back at all times. And I think that when you do those things, it immediately begins to build trust. And trust is at the heart of loyalty. And if you want to lead, you need your folks to be loyal to you, and you want that relationship to be sustainable. And so, I encourage young leaders to be authentic, to show a little empathy, to really embrace that relationship and build rapport with folks so that you can have an honest and transparent relationship. Conversations are easier with your team. You can lead better with your team when they trust you. That's at the heart of it.
You can problem solve and have tough conversations even
Exactly.
better because, you hear stories, you read articles, studies that the manager, the leader of this team, their employees, the members of the team, are disgruntled or have problems or aren't getting things done. And it all somehow goes back up to how they lead.
100%.
Even if it's a systems issue, somewhere along the line, it goes back to leadership. And so having leaders and having that trust, being authentic and building relationships really can change the trajectory of a team and of an organization.
It definitely can. We do a lot of customer service training for public school districts across the nation. And one of the big things that we talk about with parent engagement is you're not going to build trust with your parents if you're not being honest and transparent and authentic and showing empathy. It doesn't work that way.
That's not what people want in any aspect of their life.
An upset parent wants to know you care. They don't want to know what this policy says.
Right. 100 other students are having other issues, but I hate to say it, but the only one that they really care about is their own.
Right.
So they want to know what are we going to do about this?
Right. They want a solution. So they want you to help them get there.
Move on to a different subject, I guess.
Sure.
Kind of circling back to what you do. From where you sit, how would you describe the state of the comms, marketing, public strategy world?
I think there's public strategy and there are two sides to it. On the public strategy side, I think that there's a lot of disparity right now. We're in a space across globally where there are extremes. Nobody's in the middle. Folks are, it's rocky. And the heart of what stirs a lot of that up, I think, is the same thing that the marketing side is challenged with, which is technology. Whether it's AI or it's digital tools, there's digital can either be your best friend or it can be your worst friend. It can generate misinformation, it can create mistrust, or it can be a really great validator for on the ground building of relationships. And so I think we're at a point where, we have been so saturated with digital communication, and people are now realizing, hey, maybe I need to think about how I'm using this. And so I'm not saying it's going away, because I don't think it's going to go away, but I think that we are tailoring. I am seeing our clients wanting to tailor their digital communication and use them more as validators and awareness builders, and then are incorporating more one-on-one engagement activities where they're actually building that trust and rapport with folks.
I mean, it goes back to what we were just saying about
Exactly.
leadership. It's all about relationships, and especially in the comms world, it is about relationships.
Right.
Whether that's with your customer or the media
Right.
or your team. Like, people want relationships, and they want them to be authentic, and they want to feel like they can count on you. Mm-hmm. And so that trickles down to the messaging and how you do it.
And you can use technology to support all of those things and to showcase your stories. And I think that's a critical part of it. But it often falls flat when it's the only thing you use, because people don't really know who's behind things. They don't know they don't have a sense of who you are and everything.
I mean, I think about brand voice all the time.
Right.
They don't want a, one size fits all kind of voice. They want some of the best social media accounts that we see today are ones that have an insane personality.
They're rogue. They're being authentic. Back to my comment. I mean, they're being who they are.
Yeah.
And they build a huge following by doing that.
I mean, I think back to, and I feel like they kind of started this authentic social media presence, this authentic brand voice on social was Wendy's. Mm-hmm. They were a case study there, but now it's like trickled down to so many other companies, and even companies in our own community whose voice is authentic.
Well, and you even see it used through like quasi-governmental entities as well. So I'll take the Tampa airport. If you're not following the Tampa airport social media accounts, you should follow them. And locally, the Bartlett Police Department's another one of my favorites of mine. But the TPA, the airport, they have their own personality, and they have that saltiness that Wendy's does, and they're silly and they're fun, but they get the information out there, and you want to read their posts because it's going to be entertaining, but at the same time they've always got a message woven in, and it's so much more enjoyable that way.
I'll say I'll shout out another local government type entity. TDOT has some pretty good ones.
They've totally changed their approach to things.
It always makes me laugh when I see it, and like you said, they weave in their message, and it's they might be doing a trend that in a completely different way, but now they're telling me that this road is going to be blocked off for the next week and a half because they're going to be repaving the roads or whatever.
Right.
Did I watch the whole video? Yes, I did.
Right.
And now I know that information.
But it's also about appealing to a certain audience. We see this with our public school clients. They're using more and more students to tell their stories, whether it's, using students for voicemails, using students to do tours, all those types of things. But my favorite thing lately, and I'm sure you've seen multiple examples of it, is where they set up a camera in the hallway. And they have to tell, what's something good that's happened today? Who's not going to watch that? I mean, who's not going to get sucked in by that emotion that really shows that sense of place and that sense of belonging that a student has in a school? Mm-hmm. So,
I saw one where it was like, shout out your favorite teacher, or shout out the teacher that's made the biggest impact on you.
Yeah.
And people it felt like there were floods of people coming up, because you could see in the background of the video people standing around kind of waiting for their turn to be the one to say, Mr. Jones is the best teacher, or Mr. Jones taught me so much about XYZ.
Right.
And it's that, again, relationships. Wow. Mm-hmm. Crazy how we always go back to that.
Know.
So before we wrap up, our time is almost up.
Sure.
I know it's flown by. What is one piece of advice in comms or in life that has stuck with you and that you keep coming back to?
So I think the number one thing is to be curious. I mean, as an anthropologist, it's part of my MO. It's how I operate. But also I was raised that way. I mean, if we had a question, my husband makes fun of me because he hates to travel with my mother and I, because we'll be like, I wonder what that is. I wonder. And Scott's like, okay, well, you have said I wonder at least 200 times in the last hour. But the whole point is about that curiosity. And I think that the more you learn, the more you spend time doing research, one, you're going to be able to interact with folks better. Say maybe you can't travel as much, but you can be aware of things around. You know, if you're a new team member and you've got a client in another state, learn what's going on in that state. Pay attention to the news. Watch before you get on the client call, check the weather, check the news. All you got to do, it takes 30 seconds, pull it up, see if there's something major that's happened so that you can have a point of contact, some type of touch point with folks. But if you're not curious, you're just going to have a stale and stagnant relationship, and it's not going to be something that's sustainable and like a long term. And I think that when we lose curiosity, we lose relationships, we lose whimsy, we lose our imagination. And part of this like emergence and growth of technology is that we are all so attached to our devices that we're not always looking around. We're not looking, you know, beyond our device. And then when we are on our device, that we're not necessarily looking at things that are enhancing our knowledge that can help us personally or professionally.
Yeah. Paige, thank you so much for coming on the Talk Chamber.
I'm happy to be here. Always happy to support the Greater Memphis Chamber.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Talk Chamber. We are so glad you're here. Today, Paige shared with us all about the Women's Business Council, what they do, and why they're important. If you enjoyed this episode or learned a valuable piece of information, share this episode with a friend or maybe even a colleague. Subscribe to the Talk Chamber to keep up with the latest on the Chamber, economic development, and all things Memphis. Follow us on social media at Memphis Chamber, and we'll see you next time.